Today I was supposed to release the first part in a 5-part series that was going to go on all of this week, addressing the Kraut and tea scandal that is going on, that exploded over the weekend. I was going to be doing a post every week discussing different facets of the scandal and what it represented, but circumstances changed. I'm only going to be doing this one video. But before I get into it, I just want to say a few things about the YouTuber Kraut and tea. Now, last night information came out that proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that he was indeed trying to dox me and wanted to use my personal and private information in order to smear me and humiliate me and drive me off the internet. That was his goal. That was the only reason to assemble this doxing information about me. He had a whole Discord server about it. It came out last night. It was proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that he ran it, and his little minions were all there helping him along. Turned out, when this proof came out, that his apology that he'd released just a couple of hours earlier, that was a lie. A complete and utter lie. He was a doxer and a liar. He was a man who was trying to use intimidation and blackmail to silence opposition. In other words, he was a scumbag, and it was proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. Now, in this video, I'm going to sort of talk about the different facets of this scandal, but before I get into that, I just want to say the following about Kraut and tea. This has always been my position on the man. He is a young man of remarkable energy and enormous talent and enormous focus. Now, he has destroyed everything that he built here on YouTube. I would venture to say that we're never going to see him again. I would also venture to say that right now he's probably going through the worst time of his life because he's been proven beyond question to be a complete and utter slimeball. I mean, a liar and a doxer, and you know, you don't get any worse. He doesn't have any friends left on the internet. He doesn't have anybody who would support him or take him seriously. It's gone beyond him being considered a buffoon or a fool for having gone on this quixotic chase after the alt-right. Now he's just considered just despicable. And yet I do believe that if he's smart, he will take this utter catastrophe that he inflicted on himself. He will take this utter catastrophe and make something out of it. I always say that the days are long, but the decades are short. 10, 20 years get behind you awfully quickly. And if he moves on, he will discover that he has a long road ahead of him. And there's that saying that you can't keep a good man down. I would not say that Kraut and tea is a good man, at least not in a moral sense, but he's a very capable young man. And I do believe what Solzhenitsyn said, that the line dividing good and evil does not separate people. The line separating good from evil runs right down the middle of every human heart. There's no question that Kraut and tea committed just despicable acts. But I do believe that if he can get over this hump over the next few weeks, he will have quite the future ahead of him. Honestly, I have to say that I'm very concerned about him. If I had to bet, I would say that there is maybe a 20–30% chance that he will commit suicide. And I don't say that lightly. You see, I had 2 close friends of mine who committed suicide under similar circumstances to the situation that is befalling Kraut and tea. I discussed one of them here. These 2 friends of mine, close friends of mine, young men whom I loved deeply and whom I respected and who I thought would be with me in the road of life. One was called Mark Rice and the other was called Anthony Lightfoot. They did really, really stupid shit. And they wrecked their lives. And in that wreckage, they decided that it was better to end it than to continue. I myself have had to brush off a wreckage of a life. When I was a young man, when I was in college, my freshman fall, it seemed that my life was ruined, and yet I moved on. And it turned out retrospectively that that ruin, that wreckage that I left behind, turned out to be the most important thing in my life. that wreckage, that ruin that I left behind and moved forward, well, it gave me the courage to face anything that would come my way later on. It made me realize that it wouldn't be that bad. And so I say to Kraut, whom I hope is listening, I truly believe that you are a very, very talented young man and a very energetic young man, and that the road in front of you is going to be very long and very fruitful if you learn from this disaster that you inflicted on yourself. It was born out of hubris, just arrogance, a lack of humility in the face of what you didn't know, and a desperation and egocentrism that just led you down just the wrong path. I honestly hope that you can become the man that you have the potential to become. I do believe that if you take this wreckage that you are leaving behind to heart, I think that one day you will become a man whom I could respect. Okay, let's get on with the video. Now, so much shit happened that I had to write it down. You know, I mean, I usually don't. I just like start talking, you know, and just, try to figure out what's what in the editing suite. But here I had to write it down, so I'm going to be reading from notes. You'll have to forgive me. And the first thing that I wanted to say, like an introduction to this video, is the story about Jorge Luis Borges. You see, Jorge Luis Borges, the Argentine writer, who was sympathetic to Pinochet, by the way. It's what cost him the Nobel Prize. He deserved a Nobel Prize. He was one of the great writers of the 20th century. Jorge Luis Borges had this habit of coming up with really great ideas for books, really terrific ideas for novels, but he just didn't have the patience to sit down there for 2, 3, 4 years and write the stupid thing, right? So he'd write these short stories that were essentially like book reports, right? Or book reviews of fictitious books that he had never done, right? And it was really terrific, and eventually it led to great masterpieces like Pierre Menard, the author of Don Quixote, or The Secret Miracle. You know, fantastic stories about imagination and time and just phenomenal stuff. Anyway, my point. You see, he would, write these little short stories about novels that he never got around to writing, okay? So this post is a little bit going to be like that. I'm going to be talking about the 5 posts that I was going to do this week that circumstances have rendered irrelevant. Because you see, I was going to go on a scorched earth campaign, right? I figured that Kraut was going to be around, so I just had to just hammer him every day with a video. But now that he's gone, now that circumstances have changed, it's become superfluous. However, the questions raised by this scandal still remain, and they're valid questions. And so that's why I'm going to be talking about them. I'm going to be talking about them in some detail. And so let me get through this. Right, so just, a quick recap of the events. Kraut, it came out that there was this server. Kraut issued an apology video, a short one, 2.5 minutes, on his channel last night, or yesterday, it depends on your time zone. And it came out and nobody believed him. It sounded like bullshit because he was basically pointing the finger at a guy called Zeph, one of his minions there in that server, in that dox and smear server. He was pointing his fingers at Zeph, and nobody bought it, and Zeph started, fighting back and flinging shit at Kraut in return with evidence, with recordings, with screenshots and all the rest of it. And so, classic prisoner's dilemma kind of situation, right? The evidence that Zeph started flinging around was so damning to Kraut that it became obvious that he had been lying through his teeth, specifically on the issue of doxing. He doxed me. Okay. Remember when I said that, the video, it's right here, that Kraut planned to dox me? I was right. I was absolutely right. Braving Ruin released a video where it showed that those 3 points of attack that they were going to go after me on, those were the ones, They were going to go right there, and they were so predictable, right? Anyway, it turned out that it was all true. Kraut was shown to be a complete and utter liar because his apology was just total bullshit. He showed himself to be a doxer. He was gleefully trying to dox me and gleefully trying to dox other people too. We'll get to that in just a moment. And, there was no recourse for him. And so he fell on his sword and just abandoned the field because he knew he was defeated. And like I said before, I don't think that we're ever going to see Kraut and T ever again. Or he better not show up. But anyway, my point, he realized that it was over for him. He had destroyed everything that he had built. But, well, you know, so the events made it unnecessary for me to make these multiple videos. I mean, there was no point, you know. It's not that I had to go on a scorched earth campaign. The castle had been burned to the ground from within. So, you know, that was that. So the points remain. So these are the videos I was going to do over the coming days. The first one was going to be about targets and doxers. I was going to call it something clever like, you know, the naughty list and the nice list or something like that, you know. It was going to be a discussion of all the people who had been targeted in Kraut and T's doxing and smearing server. There were a whole host of them, and as you can see on your screen there, some of these people are quite small, and some of them are quite large, and some of them are like irrelevant to the whole alternative right race realist discussion. Like Paul Joseph Watson, for instance, over at Prison Planet. What exactly was the point of having him on that list? Because after all, Paul Joseph Watson and Kraut had never had any kind of contact, or nobody in that group. And the only thing that Paul Joseph Watson had going for him is that he's a very, very big YouTuber, a very well-known presence on the internet. So why was he on the list? And why was somebody as inconsequential, I say this with great respect towards her, but somebody as inconsequential as Aiden Paladin or Blonde in the Belly of the Beast, for instance? Those two women were on it. Why were they on it? Because, as I say, I adore both women. They're wonderful, wonderful people. But they have small channels, and their influence is quite profound within the YouTube community, but in the wider world. I mean, I don't think either one of them has had a 100,000 view post. Maybe they have here or there, but, you know, they're not big YouTubers like Black Pigeon Speaks. And Kraut and Black Pigeon Speaks, I don't believe I've had any contact. And so I'm not clear why he was on the list. So I was going to go analyzing them. I was going to divide them into, basically there were people who Kraut had a personal animus towards, like Blonde, like Aiden, like Jean-Francois, tiny channel, 18,000 subs, right? Why him? Why target him if he's so small, right? Why target Paul Joseph Watson, who Kraut and T had never had any dealings with or any argument with? Paul Joseph Watson is famously not alt-right. He disavowed them back in late 2016, though he is right. So what exactly was the point of that? Okay, and I was going to leave it for later, but anyway. And then I was going to turn my attention to the doxers and go through all of the doxers, all of the people who were on that list. And basically I was going to argue that, you see that chart right now on the screen, right? Everybody who was on the left of the screen, you know, Kraut and all his minions there, those were the really naughty people, you know, because those were the ones who clearly knew what the server was about. And then there was the second tier, the so-called publishers, and the researchers or investigators. I don't have the list in front of me, so whatever it's called. You know, those two tiers of people clearly knew what was going on. You know, all of these people knew full well that this was a doxing and smearing server. In point of fact, the whole idea was that the researchers were going to get the information, and the publishers were going to use their platforms to spread this information, this doxing and smearing information about all the targets, including me, you know. My luck was that I got out ahead of this whole situation, but the others, well, you know, perhaps some of them, or most of them, or all of them would not have been so fortunate, or perhaps they wouldn't have known where the attacks would be coming from, or what have you. But be that as it may, it was clear that those three tiers knew what was going on, that this was a doxing and smearing server. Now the other people, one can only speculate. Now here I am going to refrain from judging and saying that they definitively knew or did not know. For instance, I doubt if Thunderfoot was aware of what this server was about, because he's so big that people just add him onto their servers. So it's unclear if he would have had any idea, any clue whatsoever about what was going on. But the smaller channels, they must have known. Why? Because the smaller channels, like all small channels, are hungry for subscribers. They're hungry for views. And so, like Remora Fish, they attach themselves to bigger sharks, right? And they try to grow their channel that way. I've done it. I don't have a problem saying it. I've tried to get other bigger YouTubers to acknowledge me and notice me and help me along, and some of them have been extremely kind and have done so. Right? But my point, this is a natural thing of small channels, of trying to latch on to a bigger channel. And so a smaller channel, like Hi, I Think I'm Real, like Academic Agent, they would know what was going on in the server. They would know for sure because they'd be in there. They'd be in there looking around, perhaps not contributing, but they would have a sense of what was going on, what was the point of that server. See? I mean, I remember when I had, 3,000, 4,000 subscribers, which wasn't that long ago. If somebody like Kraut and T of that size had invited me onto a private server, I would have been gleeful. I would have been so excited. I mean, I can imagine Hi, I Think It's Real or Academic Agent just jumping to the moon thinking that they're a part of this really cool club that is going to go and give righteous vengeance to people that they don't like. Because I know for a fact that those two individuals hate my guts, and they hate the guts of a lot of other people who were on that list, right? So yeah, it's clear that some knew, some didn't. I think that the bigger ones were not too clear about it. Though I suspect Bunty King, I suspect he knew. I suspect, but I don't have any proof. So I have to be very clear. It's a suspicion. Okay? As to the smaller channels, the smaller they are, the more likely they would have known. Because small channels don't get invited anywhere. They're sort of like the ugly girls. And I used to be one. Okay, I didn't get invited anywhere. Nobody wanted to stream with me. Nobody wanted me on some private Discord server, right? So yeah, that makes sense. Okay, but we'll never know. Perhaps there is somewhere out there some recording or some log or something that says that who knew what. I don't know. I don't know about this shit. I can only speculate. But the point of this first episode was going to be sort of like, these are the nice people who are targeted and these are the naughty people, and let's see how naughty are some of them, okay? These are the really naughty ones, i.e. everybody on the left of the chart, and then the second column, and then the third column, equally naughty, because they all knew what was going on. All those people, that girl with an opinion, she actually tweeted a confession when this thing broke. She tweeted a confession towards me, and I have a screenshot, and it's going to appear magic. She tweeted that she knew, right? And a lot of people saw it because I didn't, archive it. I don't know how to archive it. I'm not that sophisticated with this stuff, but I'm an old man. I mean, this whole electricity thing is new to me. But be that as it may, it's obvious that that all these people knew. They knew what it was about. So for them to pretend now, they're just rats jumping off a ship, right? Now there were two names I was going to mention at the end of the episode. Okay, two key names that were not on either list. Okay, well, a third, me. I wasn't on any list. I had a separate server, so that's why I wasn't on this list. But it really pisses me off. I'm not on like the list, I mean, I had my own server. They really wanted to get me, right? And these other people, they just were on a list. They were like their own little separate channels within a server, right? But it bothers me because I want to be on a list of enemies. Yeah, it's very Nixonian. It just makes me feel good about myself. Anyway, I was going to end with two names that episode. The first was a woman named Amy Harmon. Amy Harmon, it's not a very memorable name, so let me give you a little pieces of information so that you might remember her a little bit better. Amy Harmon, the New York Times reporter. Amy Harmon, the two-time Pulitzer Prize winner. They don't hand out Pulitzer Prizes just for fun, and they don't hand them out casually. Okay? Now, this was a big deal. This woman, she's a big wheel in the New York Times, in the mainstream media. Yeah, she's not like famous like, I don't know, Megyn Kelly or some shit like that, but Amy Harmon is a big deal. And they were in contact with her. This server, this task force server that Kraut led, was in contact with this two-time Pulitzer Prize winning reporter for the New York Times. The New York Times, the preeminent mainstream newspaper. Okay? Now that's a big fucking deal. That's name number one. And the other name that wasn't on this list, but was peripherally connected to it, and I will explain why, is Sargon of Akkad, the leader of the skeptic community. Because you see, all of the people, all of the naughty people, they were all skeptics. They were all on the skeptic side. And Sargon of Akkad is the acknowledged leader of these people. Those were the two names that I was going to end this first episode with. The second episode was going to be all about Amy Harmon. Amy Harmon, the New York Times reporter, and why had they contacted her? What was the upshot? And it would explain my suspicion that Kraut and his team had created a server about me. It was called taskforce.crp. And I suspected that they were going to do servers for each one of the targets on their list. Now, why had they targeted somebody like Paul Joseph Watson, whom they don't interact with? And that's when I thought to myself, they had created this team of investigators, doxers really. They call themselves investigators or researchers or whatever the fuck, but you know, academics. Bring in the academics! Academics, please respond. Yeah, doxers, please respond. That was the truth. They had assembled this team, and they were going to deploy this team to go after each individual person on that list, the big names and the little names. The little names were personal vendettas that Kraut had against these people, like Blonde in the Belly of the Beast, like Aidan Paladin, like Jean-Francois Galipi. Why did he have personal vendetta against those people? Because they had embarrassed him. They had shown themselves to be more capable than him. They had shown that he was a fool insofar as the alt-right stuff. The bigger names, Black Pigeon Speaks, Paul Joseph Watson, Stephen Molyneux. Stephen Molyneux? Stephen Molyneux? Why? Because he was going to give this information, this doxing information, this smear information to this Amy Harmon woman at the New York Times and have her do what that fucking rag up in Scotland did to poor Millennial Woes. Dox him. Drive him underground. Because that newspaper up in Scotland, they released Millennial Woe's name, right? And they did a whole article about him, okay? Saying his actual name, where he lived, his age, his employment record, everything, right? They drove him underground. Millennial Woes had to flee the country, had to flee the country of his birth, Scotland, and go to Europe, right? They were going to do the exact same thing, and they were going to use Amy Harmon to do it. Amy Harmon, you look through her CV, the articles rather that she posted in the New York Times, they're all SJW shit. She believes all that crap. She believes that, you know, alt-right are basically Nazis who are out to eat minority babies or some shit like that, right? So they were going to use her to drive all of the people, the big names, on that list underground. And the smaller names, like Aidan, like Jean-Francois, like Blonde, they were just going to pick them off themselves, right? But the big names, Molyneux, Paul Joseph Watson, Black Pigeon Speaks, who's already had a couple of run-ins with the New York Times. And they came awfully close to doxing him, and they could have. I suspect that there were a few threats, legal threats. I'm sure. I happen to know a little bit. Black Pigeon Speaks, wonderful individual, but he doesn't fuck around. He's a grown-up, and he knows how things work, okay? I suspect that he must have, like, made it clear that if they doxed him, he'd break them in some sort of lawsuit or something like that. I wouldn't be surprised at any rate. But the other people, you know, what was the intention? They wanted to smear them and use the New York Times to dox them and smear them. That was the point. That's why they had these big names that Kraut and his team never dealt with, never had a problem with. Kraut and his team had become social justice warriors who were fighting the good fight against the alt-right and anybody sympathetic or not critical enough of the alt-right. That's what was going on. And that was going to be the point of my second video. Now the third video. Third video was going to be like a little detour. It was going to be about the Kilroy event. The Kilroy event and Base Mama, because as you can see, Base Mama is on that list of people involved in the server. Base Mama was there. Base Mama was there, and Base Mama used alt-right figures to raise funds, and once the goal of the money was reached, she started discarding them systematically. Baked Alaska, Millennial Woes, James Alsop, they all were pushed out, expunged by Base Mama only after she had gotten the money. Okay? And Jim, Mr. Medicor, clever bastard, last night he pointed out something that I was going to point out in that video. And I was going to point out the fact, you know, they raised all this money to finance this Kilroy event, but then were they going to charge for the tickets to the event as well? I mean, does that mean that if you contribute, you still have to pay for your ticket? Because that was never answered, and I suspect that they were going to have to pay for their ticket at the door. See? I think that this is just a big old scam that Base Mama is running. I can't prove this, but it seems the logical inference. I mean, look at what you have in front of you. You have Base Mama, who collected all of these figures, especially people on the alt-right, for a free speech event, okay? And as soon as she got to that $89,000 mark that she had financed her event, she started cutting every one of the alt-righters, every single one, because she got the money from their followers and then pushed them aside because she didn't want to have anything to do with alt-right, because she's a social justice warrior. Skeptic my fucking ass. She's an SJW. Hardcore. She doesn't like any alt-right. She doesn't believe in free speech. I mean, how on earth can you possibly believe in free speech when you put up, look, those NDAs that she had people sign? Tim Pool, right here, did a great video about it. Oh, the other guy, James Alsop, seems like a terrific guy. He also did a video right here, okay? These people were being forced and cajoled into signing non-compete and NDA agreements, non-disclosure agreements, that were just crazy, okay? I mean, what was up with that, right? It was a way to wedge them out. I bet that not all of them got them. I bet that the ones who didn't get them were like the buddies of Base Mama, because at the end of the day, I think that what Base Mama wants, bottom line, is to just have a big old party with her friends and have other people pay for it. I think that that's at heart what she wants. Not Dave Cullen, by the way. I think that Dave Cullen is completely sincere. I respect him enormously. If you notice, he had nothing to do with that server, with Kraut server, or any of that shit. I mean, he's a guy who keeps his nose clean, he does his work, he seems to be a very decent individual, and I have nothing but respect for him, okay? I think that Base Mama was a different story. I think that that's what she wanted, and she used the alt-right to get the money, and once she had the money, fuck you. That's how it went down. It's obvious. I mean, is there any other way to look at it? And so I was going to basically conclude that third episode by saying that the Kilroy event, it's just a big old circle jerk. You can see all of the shit that was going to go on in that event. You can see it on any stream over the weekend for free. You don't even have to go to crappy Phoenix, Arizona. Who wants to go to some shithole like that? Why does doxing and smearing matter? Why is this whole scandal going on? It's all about free speech. The fourth episode was actually going to be a little bit abstract, okay, and go to the heart of what this whole issue is about, which is free speech. I mean, we're talking about the Kilroy event and that little petty scandal and this server and this secret server and doxing and smearing and ooh, secret agent shit. But in this fourth episode, I was going to dive into the very important aspect of free speech and why doxing and smearing, or the threat of smearing, is such a terrible thing. Why do we want free speech as a value? We want free speech as a value so that people can speak their mind and put ideas on the table, perhaps unpopular ideas that might actually be beneficial to all of us. Most good ideas, when they originate, are unpopular. And it's a lot of struggle, and eventually that very good idea that turned out to be unpopular at first becomes the norm because everybody realizes it's a good idea and everybody adopts it. So that's why we want, as a healthy society, to have free speech, to have the so-called marketplace of ideas. We want any idea, however crazy, to be able to bubble up to the surface and spread out to see if it works or not. Because sometimes even the ideas that we think are craziest of them all turn out to be good ideas that everybody agrees with and joins in and makes for a better, healthier society, right? In the internet, one of the important things, one of the best values of the internet is that you can have anybody, no matter how lowly, no matter how small their channel, no matter how insignificant their Twitter presence is, you can have anybody say anything, and perhaps a good idea will come out of it. Maybe it's controversial and unpopular at first, but eventually it will bloom and flower and it will be better for our society. But if you have people who are using personal information to scare people, then what do? They refrain from speaking because they're afraid. They're afraid for their livelihoods. That's why anonymity is so important on the internet. Because you want to be anonymous so that you can speak your mind freely and not be afraid of consequences. So somebody who is trying to dox you, somebody who's trying to get information about you, like what this server was about, what are they trying to do? They're trying to get information about you so they can threaten you with it or blow you out of the water, destroy your livelihood, prevent you from speaking your mind. That's why this server was so scandalous. Because who gives a shit where this guy lives or that guy lives? Who gives a shit if, this woman over there, she, did whatever, It doesn't matter, like, the specifics. What it is that by threatening people with the revelation of their personal information, you silence them. And that's what Kraut and his goons were doing. They were getting together, getting information about people with the aim of silencing them. Silencing their ideas because they didn't like the ideas and they couldn't argue against the ideas that these people had. That was the problem. And so the only method they knew to counteract the ideas that they didn't like was to find personal information about them and try to dox them and try to smear them. And it was their bad luck that they came across me as their first target. And I got out ahead of this. And I was able to basically, tell them a big fuck you very much, because it didn't matter. Because I, myself, it doesn't matter if I get doxed or not, okay? My circumstances are such that it's not going to be important. Maybe somebody here or there will actually know, somebody close to me in my life, and they'll be pissed off, but they're not going to be surprised because they already know. But other people whose livelihoods are a little bit contingent, other people who don't have the means to withstand some kind of media assault, because after all, that's why they contacted the New York Times. Because they wanted to drive these bigger channels to the ground, destroy Molyneux, destroy Black Pigeon Speaks, destroy Paul Joseph Watson. That was the point, to silence them, because they didn't like what they had to say. Because Kraut and T and everybody on that server at heart was an SJW. They couldn't fight the ideas of the alt-right or the hard-right, and so they were going to destroy them. Because they didn't like the ideas, and they couldn't argue the ideas. They were fucking hypocrites. That's what I was going to say in the fourth one. Now in the fifth one, leadership. Sargon of Akkad, king of the skeptics, right? The leader, the acknowledged leader of the skeptic community. It is my contention that he knew what Kraut and T were up to. Like I said before, he wasn't in the server. He wasn't on the server. But he knew. Now, how do I know that he knew? Very simple. You see, about a month ago or something like that, I, by chance, and you can ask him yourself, I ran into him at a London camera shop. And we wound up having lunch. Him, me, and my girlfriend. And we got to talking, and we hit it off. I like him. I think he's a great guy. Great guy, but weakling. He's not a leader. He is leading the skeptics, or let me phrase it. He is at the head of the skeptics, but he's not leading them. Okay? Now, I have no doubt that Sargon of Akkad knew about Kraut and T's thing for the following reasons. In this comment that he left in a conversation between Uzalu and J.F. Garipia, In the comment, he says that he knew that Kraut was digging up dirt and he didn't approve. Now, this was, as you can tell by the comment and the dates, this was about a week before this whole scandal broke, right? And I looked at that comment, and then I listened to the whole conversation between Uzalu and JF, and there was no indication whatsoever that Uzalu, I mean, Uzalu didn't even like mention the possibility that Kraut was digging up dirt. He only talked about the fact that Kraut was, attacking the alt-right, and that it was a foolish, quixotic endeavor, right? But he never mentioned anything about doxing or digging up dirt on anybody. That's when I knew. And point of fact, I wasn't the one who discovered that comment. It was actually somebody else. I won't mention who this person was. But this person is a YouTuber, and I don't want to put this person into any problems. But this person indicated to me this comment. I went to the comment, and it was obvious. That's when I knew. Sargon of Akkad knew what Kraut and T was up to. Perhaps not the specifics of it, but enough. He knew that Kraut and T was digging up dirt on other people. Digging up dirt, what does that mean? Going through their videos and finding good arguments against those videos? No, digging up dirt is digging up shit. Doxing shit. Things that will embarrass them. Dirt. Okay? Not like finding some video where somebody says something stupid. No. Dirt. Sargon of Akkad knew before the scandal broke. Remember, the scandal broke on Friday when JF Garipe ran some recordings from the Discord server. The recordings were making fun of, were Kraut making fun of JF for being French and using fairly ugly language, but be that as it may. See, the comment Sargon of Akkad was from before, and that's when I knew that Sargon knew. Of course, I couldn't prove it. Just, a couple of phrases in a comment on some random video is not enough for proof. See? But then, last night, it came out this Graf, whatever guy, the little minion of Kraut and T, who was helping him, one of the investigators, one of the detectives, right? Okay, well, it turned out that he recorded 5 hours, over 5 hours, of Kraut and T and Sargon talking. I'll bet you $100 right here and now that in those 5 hours, it came out what Kraut and T was up to, right? And that was December 11th? That was quite some time ago. Sargon knew. Kraut told him in that conversation. I don't know, I haven't heard the conversation. I'm sure it exists. It'll come out eventually. Maybe it's coming out now as I'm putting up this video. I don't know. I don't care. The point is, I'm sure that Sargon knew. He knew on the 11th. And he didn't say anything. He just put up some video on the Thinkery, I think, saying that he didn't approve of Kraut anymore in his endeavor insofar as the alt-right. That's not enough. Sargon of Akkad knew about the server. Kraut told him in that conversation, or intimated enough that anybody reasonable would draw the inference that Kraut was gathering dirt on his enemies, quote unquote. That's what Sargon of Akkad wrote in that comment, because he knew. Sargon of Akkad knew. And it's in that conversation, Kraut probably told him, or told him enough for Sargon to figure out what was going on. And Sargon, what did he do? Did he act like a leader? No, he did not. I'll tell you what a leader would have done. After that conversation, I find out somebody who is allied to me, like Kraut was allied to Sargon, somebody like that is allied to me and is running some doxing and smearing server. I'd hang up that conversation. I would do a video saying, I want nothing to do with Kraut and T because he is running a doxing and smearing server. That's what I'd say. I'd tweet it out. I'd do a little video about it. I'd say, I'm through with Kraut and T. Nothing to do with him. I'd throw him under the bus. I'd have to. Because you see, when you are the leader of a group of people, like Sargon of Akkad is, whether he likes it or not, because he actually doesn't like it, but we'll get to that in a minute. You see, if you are leading a group of people and one of your underlings does something stupid, you basically have two options. Either you put up with it and defend him, or you throw him under the bus. See? Well, actually, no, there are three possibilities. You ignore it, you defend him, or you throw him under the bus. See? Eisenhower, Dwight Eisenhower, the president, he said that one of the hardest things for him as a general and then later president was signing a bad letter. Obvious, because, see, a very busy man such as Eisenhower was in his different positions, he doesn't have time to write letters. So he just comes and signs them. Somebody on the staff writes the letter, right? Whatever the letter might be. And he just looks it over and signs it, and that's that, and goes off, right? Because he doesn't have the time to write the letter, right? But the staff, maybe not so capable people, not so good at writing letters, write a crappy letter. And he has to sign it because he doesn't have the time to fix it, right? So that's like a minor screw up by an underling, a badly written letter or something like that, something similar, right? Then there are, medium-sized screw-ups, where the staffer does something, the ally, the underling does something that makes you look bad, but it's not the end of the world. It's embarrassing or frustrating or sort of like hurts the cause, something like that. Well, you protect him in public, while in private, you scold him, right? But when an underling does something really beyond the pale, that's just not acceptable, you have to throw him under the bus. You have to exercise ruthlessness. You have to protect your position as a leader and protect your movement, your group, your people. That's why you throw people under the bus. That's why in the church, back in the Middle Ages, they used to burn people at the stake. Why do you think? It was to keep everybody in line and keep the movement cohesive and coherent and solid, rock solid, right? See? If they say something heterodox or something heretical, they got to go, okay? Nixon, for instance, if only he had taken John Mitchell, who was the head of the campaign to re-elect the president, if only he had taken, after Watergate, taken John Mitchell and said, I'm going to have to give you up, my man, and just thrown him to the wolves and said, it was John Mitchell, and just pressed the ejection button and just shot him at, the building of the Washington Post, right? Watergate never would have happened. That would have been that. John Mitchell was involved in something nefarious. The president had nothing to do with it. Done. Sargon of Akkad knew. Okay. What he should have done was put a stop to it instantly. Because, of course, this isn't just a little scandal here we're talking about. We're talking about the livelihoods of people. Okay? I mean, that's the real sin here. Sargon of Akkad knew that Kraut and Tea was doing this incredibly stupid dox and smear campaign, and this could affect the livelihoods of people. This could ruin people, ruin them in ways that they would never recover from, like if some of these people like Aidan Paladin, for instance, everybody knows that she's a PhD candidate in a social science. I mean, that's like literally the belly of the beast, right? She's in SJW territory. If anybody in her circle got wind of what she's up to, her life would be over. Everything that she has worked for in the 7 years of her life would be over instantly. What Kraut and Tea were doing was so incredibly dangerous. And as the leader of the skeptics, as an individual with full knowledge of what was going on, he had the obligation to stand up and say, this is wrong, this is evil, and this Kraut and Tea is doing something beyond the pale that cannot be accepted and has to be stopped instantly. He should have done that. He didn't. Because this goes to the problem with Sargon of Akkad. Sargon of Akkad, as he himself has said to me on Skype, he is not a leader. He pretends to leadership. He pretends that he's a leader, that he's the big man in charge of the, SS skeptic. But he's not. He is a man who arrived at his position without having any idea of how it happened. He essentially lucked into his audience. Let's face facts. That's why he's sort of like, paralyzed and does the same shit over and over and is essentially not controversial. He is the most conservative man I've ever met. Not politically, of course, in terms of his life and the way he behaves. Because he doesn't know why he's in the position that he's in. And the funny thing, the amusing thing for me, is that he's saying that he's read all these books on strategy and tactics and leadership and Machiavelli and shit like that. But as I said to him personally, and I will say to you now, see, in theory, there is no difference between theory and practice. In practice, there is. In terms of exercising power, leadership, it's not enough to know a bunch of books. It doesn't help at all, as a matter of fact. You have to actually go out there and do it and get your hands dirty, really dirty, with blood most of the time. He didn't have the balls to throw Kraut under the bus. At best, after a few days of mulling over this whole thing that he knew about, what did he do? He does this little milquetoast thing that, you know, oh, I think that Kraut is being a bad boy. He didn't go out in front of everybody and say what had to be said. And what had to be said was that this son of a bitch is doing something evil that has to be stopped now. Sargon of Akkad didn't have the balls to lead. No wonder the skeptics are so pathetic. They are leaderless, rudderless. They have a fat little tubby nothing of a man who didn't have the moral gumption to stop something that he knew was wrong. It affected me, and he knew it, and he did nothing about it. So what, I'm supposed to be like, oh, you know, Sargon, you know, oh, poor little Sargon, or scared of the fat little fuck? I despise the man because he is a coward, just like Kraut and tea. Now, how is this going to end? Now that I've told you the 5 episodes that I was planning on doing, okay, what conclusions can we arrive at here? Number 1, I hope Kraut is smart enough not to come back as a zombie. Because first of all, nobody's going to take him seriously, all right? He has to move on with his life and just find another avenue, another mise en scène. I mean, just move on, because here, no, he's got no room, no place for him anymore, because nobody believes him. He's shown himself to be a liar, a doxer, a manipulator, an extortionist, a blackmailer. He's scum. And I don't think that, you know, out of 5 people, 4 will probably agree with me. Okay? So if zombie Kraut comes back, then we just move on to the next level. And the next level is, of course, lawsuits. And I've got money and I got time, so we'll make that happen. So Kraut is never coming back, and if he does, he's been warned. Insofar as the skeptic community, I think that this is a dagger in the heart. I think that people are going to realize, when they start thinking about it a little bit more, that the whole Kilroy event, despite Dave Cullen's best and most valiant efforts, ultimately the whole Kilroy event is just a money grab. So that they can all have a big old party at the expense of their followers, which I think is grossly unfair, but you know, that's me. But I don't think it's actually going to happen. I think it's going to collapse before the April 21st date. And if it actually does happen, it'll be just a shadow of what it could have been. And that's a real shame, because I think that free speech events that emphasize the issues of online free speech and doxing and that kind of stuff, I think it's an important issue, okay? And it's a pity that that's not going to happen. And in point of fact, I'm actually going to talk to a couple of people and see if we can do some alternative event, because this is an important issue. It is valuable, as I said, as I emphasized. This stuff is important, okay? And to leave it silent is, I think, a terrible mistake, okay? I mean, it demands a better kind of event, not this bullshit, you know? It demands a real commitment to hear all political points of view, hard left and hard right and everybody in between, and everybody united on the issues of free speech, because it matters to a healthy society, to the healthy democracies, right? Not this money grab, which is what Kilroy seems to be at this point. Anyway, finally, what was the 3rd point I was going to make? Oh yeah, I was right. I told you guys that I was right. I told you guys, and you guys never believe me, you know. I told you that Kraut planned to dox me, and he did, and exactly the points that I said he was going to try to dox me on. You know, I told you that, you know, this wasn't just me Did I? That I don't remember. But I told you so. That's the important thing. See, that's the thing I was going to emphasize my third point. That I told you so. You know, never question your coach. You know, I mean, in all seriousness, this is a tragedy. There's no other way to look at it. This is Shakespearean, really. Jim, Mr. Medicare, he's going to do a video in a couple of days. You know, Thursday, Friday, I think it's coming out, right? And I'm really looking forward to it. At the same time, with all due respect to Jim, I think that, you know, he's not going to see it in the right light. He's going to make fun of it and find it amusing, because it is amusing. But it's tragic. You see, Kraut and T, like I said before, at the very start of this conversation, he's a talented young man. And he's an energetic kid. He could go really far. He could be somebody. Somebody whom I could respect, you know. And there's plenty of time for him to go on that road and to be a better man and to learn the lessons from this disaster that he inflicted all by himself. Like I said at the beginning, a remarkably talented, hard-working, focused young man who did not fit in the traditional criteria for success in our current society. He wasn't good at school, he didn't go to college, you know. But that didn't mean that he's not talented. On the contrary, he's extremely talented, and it's precisely because he's so talented in such a unique and odd way that he didn't fit in and wasn't able to comply with, you know, the social norms, and found himself at loose ends in his mid-20s, late 20s, and found this whole YouTube thing and grew and grew and grew and grew on the strength of his talent, on the strength of his determination and drive and focus. He achieved an enormity. He achieved an enormity, and then his hubris, his arrogance, his anger towards people that he perceived as enemies drove him to destroy everything that he had built. There's no other way to look at this whole situation as one terrible tragedy. I truly do hope that Kraut and T will leave all of this behind, leave behind the very identity of Kraut and T, and take a better road. Like I said, you know, Solzhenitsyn's line, the line that divides good from evil runs through every man's heart. I hope, truly hope, that he will step on the right side of that line and carry forth and become the man that he could become. Because I do think that he could become remarkable. I wish him only the best.